Pandemic.
Good evening. Welcome to our year-end holiday special edition of Pandemic. I'm Joel Silberman, and I am here tonight with somebody who is an actual friend, where I've had guests where I'm like, yeah, they're a friend, and, you know, we had a good drinks a couple times, but this is somebody who I knew before she was a big deal, before she had the #1 hit on Netflix. Now she's got the #1 hit on Netflix. I just got a text from somebody asking if they have the live stream, if I have the live stream link for this, because they're trying to get in. It's just all goes to show that, like, we're really lucky to have Megan Metzger here, and I can see her turning a little bit red in the corner. Before I introduce her to the stream, I do want to do a quick sponsorship break and thank Roadmap Writers and Notes for Execs. Roadmap Writers is an online education platform hosted by working industry executives. If you're looking for a real-world solution to help develop, market, and sell your script, visit Roadmap Writers to learn more. Roadmapwriters.com to learn more. Notes for Execs is a company that guides working entertainment executives on how to give better and more effective creative notes. Now they're opening their doors to writers as well, who can learn a lot about their own writing through learning about the notes-giving process. Visit notesforexecs.com to learn more. And so now, without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce to the stream the writer not only of The Princess Switch, but also The Princess Switch 2, Megan Metzger. Megan, how are you?
Hi.
So was that introduction appropriately laudatory?
I think it was too laudatory. Also, I'm the co-writer of The Princess Switch 1 and 2. I didn't write it by myself. So that there was too much praise.
That seems a little bit like it's the other person's problem. I'm so excited because I don't know where to start. I think that we're going to start, or I'd like to start with some of the behind the scenes of The Princess Switch.
Okay.
And then we can shift back in time to what I know to be your extraordinarily unusual and cool and fascinating life story.
I didn't realize it was a weird story until I started taking meetings, and then people were just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So yeah, we can get into that if you want.
Absolutely. Well, also I love, just as a coming attraction for people for that second phase of the conversation, that Megan comes off as all like cute and charming and happy and holiday movie friendly, but her story is gritty and real, and it's some premium cable is what that is. It's not Hallmark. It's more premium cable. So how did you end up writing this thing, the first Princess Switch? Let's start with the first Princess Switch and how you ended up writing it, and then we will flash back like any good premium cable show to how you got here.
Was very weird how it all happened. I was on a Hallmark show as the writer's assistant called Wing Calls the Heart. And it was a little chaotic for me because I was the writer's assistant. I did some of the jobs as the PA, and our script coordinator, when I first started out, had a brain hemorrhage. And so I took over some of the script coordinating duties for a little while. But we had 4 showrunners in 2 years. And the first showrunner quit, and I had written a little bit for the show, and she knew that I was a good writer. And so one day she brought me over to her house, and she was like, I'm not going to come back to the show. Instead, I'm going to write a Christmas movie. Do you want to write a Christmas movie with me? And I really liked her a lot. And even though I'm Jewish, also just like about me and Christmas in general, like I have written, I guess, 2 movies about straight Christians. I'm a bisexual Jew, but I do love Christmas movies, and I love the genre a lot. And so I said yes. And so while I was still working as an assistant, I wrote The Princess Switch 1. And then it got released on Netflix, and it became a really big deal, which I was not expecting it to be a big deal. And then...
well, before you skate past that, I want to talk about that for a second, because I remember it becoming a big deal. And just from a human perspective, what is that like, or what was that like for you to have this thing that you had been working on in obscurity and that no one, I don't think, really expected to become such a huge hit, become what it became.
It was very weird, and it really, first it was like sneaking up on you, like oh, like all of a sudden, like for some reason I remember like going on the internet and I was just Googling Princess Switch to see like if anyone had written about it. I remember 17 magazine did like a really short like thing about it that was like a paragraph, and I was like, oh my gosh, like 17-year-old Megan would have been like, this is like peak, this is going to be the peak, like.
Absolutely the peak.
And then like I was still sort of Googling every day, and more and more articles came out, and then more people on Twitter started to talk about it, and then we were trending on Twitter, which was flabbergasting. I think that was like the craziest part, the day that we were trending, I think maybe #1 on Twitter. And
What
so
were people saying?
they really liked the movie, and they were like, this is like so cornball and so kooky, but like we love it and it's so Christmassy. And I was like, I mean, I love the movie, but I was not expecting like the reception to be so big. And so that was a little intimidating, to be honest. Because also then when I started bringing it up, people were like, oh, I know that movie. Because like, as you know, we were sort of talking about earlier, like I used to like sort of introduce myself as like, I'm Megan Metzger. I wrote a movie. It's going to come out on Netflix. And now when I say like, I'm Megan Metzger, like I've worked on Princess Switch 1 and 2. They're like, oh yeah, I watched that. That was great. And I'm like, it's just always still shocking when people say that they watched it. It's like very like this parallel universe, like where people have watched it. It's very strange. Yeah. So
what do you think it is about, and we can get to #2, but what do you think it is about it that resonated so much relative to other Christmas movies? I mean, obviously there are a lot of them, but they don't all do as well as this one did.
I think that we did our kookiness and our Christmas very unironically. We really meant what we were doing. And we very specifically chose the tone to be 1990s comedy. So we took a lot of the tone from like the Princess Diaries and like the Parent Trap, a lot of these movies that are now the comfort movies for me as an adult. And so I think that for my generation, your generation, it was almost maybe like a comfort film because it was using the same tone that the movies that we grew up with were using. And I think for a newer audience, they responded to that we weren't using it as tropes, that it was being made as like maybe a little bit more realistic. Because I remember even like writing one of the last scenes, and I had one of the characters curse, which like normally does not happen in like a Christmas movie. And so like even that bit of like more realism, I think, set it apart. And also the fact that we really worked hard on the romance arcs for both of the couples, so that those were really strong. And I think that those things, that they're more as realistic as you could possibly get about the Princess Switch, like that's how we did it. And the romance arcs were we worked really hard to make them really strong. And that's what you kind of want in a romance movie.
Right. That makes sense. And I love that bit about tone, and particularly 90s movies as a tone, because I think a lot of the time the tone for these kinds of movies ends up being very much the same from movie to movie.
Yeah.
Whereas you're right, to have some differentiation and say, no, we're going for this kind of tone from a different period in time. What do you think differentiates the tone of those kinds of movies and of the Princess Switch?
Well, I think
or differentiates the tone of older kinds of rom-coms from newer ones.
I mean, that's difficult to say because
I want to put you on the spot. That's the whole point.
I mean, it's difficult to say, I think, because that we are in a renaissance for Christmas movies. So I think if we were to talk about Christmas movies, that's going to be a different conversation than romance movies in general.
Okay.
I think that those right now are two very different markets, and their trends for tone are very different. I think for romance movies, we have a few more coming out that are than we did before. Like we went through like, I think maybe like 2005 to like 2015, there just weren't a lot being made. Like for
Right.
some reason, those like 1990s films just like weren't coming. And the movies that are being made now don't have the same sort of like odd slapstick moments that those older movies did.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're always a bit more grounded now. And I think that we are also getting like a larger plethora in the past few years of drama romances than we did before. And we're sort of seeing that trend in television as well. Like this Christmas, Shonda Rhimes is doing The Bridgertons, which is, as a romance fan, like is just insane because those books have been around forever. That's Julia Quinn's biggest novels. Like if you ask like a romance enthusiast, we know what those are. Those are bodice ripper romance novels that have been extremely popular, but just no one could do. And now Shonda Rhimes is doing it.
For those of us not in the community, define a bodice ripper, please.
Well, I mean, bodice ripper might not be the exact right way to describe the Bridgertons because there isn't really a lot of like sex in them. But I would say the like historical Regency romance novels are a huge genre, like Tessa Dare, Julia Quinn, Courtney Milan. Like there are a lot of writers who are extremely popular, New York Times bestsellers like 20 times over, and they just haven't been made into movies. And so to not only see a trend in rom-coms being more grounded, but also seeing Netflix take chances on other movies that probably wouldn't have gotten made in the 90s. We're seeing a really weird trend, not a weird trend, a different trend, a good trend in where romance is going right now. But in terms of Christmas movies, I think we're seeing a different trend, which has more to do with the content of Christmas movies than anything else, which I think is also a really important factor.
And tell me about that.
To be quite frank, I mean, like, as a bisexual Jew, I mean, I think we can sort of say out loud that most Christmas movies are about straight Christians and about Christianity in sort of one tone. And I think we can say it's like the quintessential, like, Lifetime Hallmark thing. But I mean, this year, you know, we have Lifetime's doing a gay Christmas movie. And we have movies on Netflix like Jingle Jangle, and we have movies like The Princess Witch, where there are leads that are not white. And I think that even just those trends, and we have the Happiest Season with Kristen Stewart, which was amazing, and it was on Hulu, and if you haven't watched it, you definitely should, which is also very different in tone than what we normally would see in a Christmas movie. And I think taking those, they shouldn't be risks, but sometimes people might view them as risks in the entertainment industry, has been really important for the Christmas movie, I'm going to say the holiday movie genre. And that's been really good to see. And hopefully that trend just continues a lot stronger as time goes on. And we see more people in front of the camera and behind the camera who have that diversity.
It's interesting because I'm not a connoisseur of the genre, but I have, even for me, as somebody who is looking at it from the outside, I have noticed, like, oh, wait, there's a Hanukkah one this year. Oh, wait, my friend who's like an Indian American woman was just in one, or Pakistani American. Not saying that everything's the same. I'm just saying they're not white, and like that's acceptable. And I think that, frankly, it seems to me like the audience for that, the audience for these movies was probably ready for that 10 years ago, but it took a while for Hollywood to figure that out.
70 years ago. I mean, if we go all the way back to the original rom-com, we have I Love Lucy. And when I Love Lucy, before it got made, the network didn't want to make it. And they didn't want to make it because they didn't believe that America would want to watch a white woman with a non-white husband. And so they had to go on the road for about a year with their female writer. I think her name was Madeline Poe. Madeline, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but they went on tour for a year to sort of gain an audience with their, shtick, to prove to the network that people would watch and laugh and, have a connection to a couple that was not when both people weren't white. And as we know, I Love Lucy went on to become the juggernaut of its time, and still now is like considered to be like, you know, epically rom-com and like ubiquitous. And so I feel like we keep having this conversation over and over again of like, are people ready for this? And it's like, yes, we've been ready for this the whole time. Like, and it's just really like getting people to remember who are executives and who make these things, like people are ready for it. The audience is definitely there. We've always been there.
That's an amazing story. I didn't know that story. That is a story that needs, or at least I feel very badly wants to be told in a movie or a TV show.
I have, that's on my docket list of things that I would like to tell as a movie. Yes, absolutely. Because it's like incredible. Because also the I Love Lucy, you know, they made like hundreds of episodes. I think almost all of them were written by this one woman. And like on the back of her, do I have her book next to me? I don't know. It's somewhere in the house. On the back of her, like, you know, those like chairs that say like director or like the name of the person. On like the back of her chair, she said woman writer. Like, it's just so weird. Like, and so I feel like even, you know, like the 1940s, 1950s, we were like having this conversation like, oh, are we ready for this? And it's like, of course we are. Like, we're definitely ready.
Well, I'm sold. And it sounds like at first it was just the story of them on the road that I was like, oh, well, that's a movie, like a great road trip kind of movie about the creation of I Love Lucy, and particularly proving that America was ready to watch an interracial couple.
Yeah.
And now it sounds like you could have a whole show. You could have it's just called Woman Writer.
Woman Writer.
I'm sold on this.
I mean, I'd watch it 100%.
That's a content.
Yeah.
that is a premium content right there. Wow. Okay. Well, so after the show, we'll talk about how we produce that, because I desperately want for that to happen. And let's go to Princess Switch 2, which obviously just came out and is popular in its own right, and what it's like coming back to a franchise, as it were. When you're writing this thing, the first one you're writing, and it's just like, yeah, I'm writing a movie. We'll see if anybody sees it. It becomes a minor phenomenon. Mm-hmm. What happens next when you have to go back and write the next one, and how is that different?
It was interesting because originally, so we have in the second movie, we have 3 characters who are all played by Vanessa. And originally that was my plan for Princess Switch 3, but we liked it so much we moved it up to Princess Switch 2. And we also did something similar in Princess Switch 1, where we thought what we were going to put in Princess Switch 2, we moved into Princess Switch 1. So we sort of just moved up everything that we really liked to make sure that we got it in there.
Right.
But I would say it was like it's weird coming back to a franchise, because also more eyes are on you. Like for our, you know, the first time we showed the, you know, Princess Switch 1 script to Netflix, we got 1 note back. And that was like
one note?
We got 1 note. And
what was the note?
The note was, why do these 2 girls look alike? So that's actually why in the script we have them like say, oh, like we're related because this and this, because that was the 1 note from Netflix. But there were many notes on Princess Switch 2, and I think all for the better. Like we definitely got like an excellent movie, and I think those notes helped. But is definitely, as it gets popular, you have more oversight, which is always interesting to see. And also it's just interesting because like, you know, the characters so well. Like in the first one, you're like, who are these people? And like, how are they connected? But in this one, it's like, okay, we definitely know Kevin and, you know, Stacy are friends. Kevin and Margaret are in love. And like, so you sort of already know the pieces. It's more like in terms of life events, like where are they personally in terms of these people that you already know really well and have spent years with. So that was more the, what are we gonna, where are they personally, and what sort of lives we want to portray them as having. So that's sort of what.
Well, there's an interesting between the lines there that you were, even though you didn't know it was going to become such a huge hit, you already had ideas for the sequel as you were writing the first one.
Well, I mean, I think that's how maybe a writer's brain sort of works. Like you sort of just like your mind just sort of knows. Like for the I Love Lucy thing, like I read a book about that, and so now I have like the movie outlined. I have the first scene written already. I have like literally I have it written. Like if you have ideas, they're just you got to get them out. And so I think that it was hard not to do that, and hard not to structure, the films, and hard not to think, while you're like, I don't know, watching TV, thinking about, Stacy and Margaret.
Right. And it sounds like, were you involved? Were you on set? Were you working on the production at all? Have you had interaction with the cast? And
no, we had like a viewing at Netflix, and so I got to meet some of the cast that way. But other of the cast, like Susan, who plays like the sort of like the attaché to Margaret, I haven't met yet, and I'm sort of like I see her on Twitter and Facebook. I'm like, oh, I one day maybe. Her husband owns a gluten-free bakery in London, and I'm gluten-free because one day I'm like, one day I will go to that bakery. Yeah.
and again, I'm going to just keep teasing for the audience that we are going to get to Megan's life story, and you'll find out why she's gluten-free, and it is more interesting than you'd think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not like, oh, I'm gluten-free. Yeah.
And I have a question here. What was the idea of the magical, mysterious man who always helps them out?
You mean, who do I think the magical mystery man is, or what was the idea behind having a magical mystery man?
Unclear from the question. Or if you would like to elaborate. Otherwise, Megan, you can answer in whatever way you see fit.
Because there are two very different answers to that question.
Answer both.
One was that originally he was going to be a twin, and that's why you see him in multiple places. And the magic was like twins helping out twins, but he turned into this sort of like metaphysical character, and you can call him Santa, a Christmas elf, an angel,
the spirit of Christmas.
The spirit of Christmas, whatever you feel comfortable calling him.
God.
So
Can we call him God?
What?
Can we call him God?
If you want to, you can. I like Spirit of Christmas. That's good. But
okay.
I've definitely heard a lot of people think that he's Santa, and I don't want to like dissuade anyone from like their particular reasoning of the magical man. So I think that that's up to everyone's personal journey of what they believe he is.
I like that. I like that very much. And so what are you working on now before we flash back?
Okay. I'm working on a Hanukkah movie. And so that's been really fun.
That's the one that you had, and I'm not going to say any names on the air, but that you had a big star attached to that then it didn't quite work out.
Yeah, she was attached to produce, not to be in it. We decided that we weren't gonna do that, and so we were gonna do maybe something else. And so we're doing the Hanukkah movie, and hopefully we have some people who we definitely are creating some synergy with, but I can't at this point say more than that.
I like creating synergy. I'm huge into that.
I don't know if that's like too bougie a word, synergy, but that's what's going on with that.
Cool.
And
synergy is being created in the abstract. Yeah.
There's another project, but I am definitely not allowed to talk about it at all. Like 100% not allowed to.
Cool.
And I'm also like just writing on my own. 3 other movies and 3 other TV shows. One which we may have another big name wanting to do it, but it's about sort of like my past, and we'll get into my past in a second. But they're sort of like, we can't go this dark right now during coronavirus, so we're gonna wait to do this until later.
Okay.
We'll see if that actually pans out or not, but yeah.
Well, that's a perfect segue. So, actually, why don't we do this? Why don't I do the sponsorship break a little early, And then we can go back and start with the extraordinary life and times of Megan Metzger. And again, as the coming attraction folks, we can't go this dark during COVID. That is the note about producing it as a show now. And yet, the way that Megan tells it, there's joy and love and always a smile. So we'll be right back. But first, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Roadmap Writers and Notes for Execs, who've been with us through this entire year and have been so supportive and watched us build and grow and change. Roadmap is a screenwriting education platform for writers looking for a guided path to success. Programs are hosted online by working industry executives and designed to empower writers with actionable tools to elevate their craft and cultivate industry relationships. Since 2016, Roadmap has helped more than 137 writers and counting sign to representation, including a bunch of friends of mine, and many others get staffed, optioned, or sell their scripts. To learn more, visit roadmapwriters.com and use the code PANDEMIC to save $15. Roadmap Writers, the road to your screenwriting success starts here. Notes for Execs is a company that guides working entertainment executives on how to give better and more effective creative notes. Now they're opening their doors to writers as well, who can learn a lot about their own writing through learning about the notes giving process. Visit notesforexecs.com for more information. And so, Megan, I have hyped it up so much. And now I know that you're going to think, oh gosh, how do I live up to the hype? Whatever. Just tell your story as you have told it to guests in the workshop that we were in together. You're muted, by the way. Guests in the workshop that we were in together, or on a general meeting, or any of the other times that you tell your extraordinary tale.
Well, I always sort of begin by being like, do you want the long version or the short version?
Long version, definitely long version.
Okay. So my parents were both research geologists, and we moved around a lot to various geological digs and oil sites. And so I grew up with a very weird childhood, and I didn't realize it was weird. And then my parents are both very, very, very smart, much smarter than I am. And they both got really bored with having PhDs in geology. And so my dad decided he was going to open up a model train store, and my mom was going to get her doctorate in optometry. She was going to become an optometrist. So we moved to a very, very small town in Oregon that was very conservative. And I worked in my dad's model train store every day after school, and my mom became an optometrist. And it was very strange. And also, a lot of people think of like Portland and Oregon as like very liberal, but where I was, it was not liberal and not good for a lot of reasons. I was harassed a lot for being Jewish, which was not fun. And so when it was time for me to go to college, I basically went as far away as humanly possible. I moved to London.
Well, to pause just for a second, from the way that you've described it, my understanding is there's a fair amount of Klan activity where you grew up.
Yeah, there was the
it's car. Like, oh, we're not super into Jews. It's like
I don't necessarily want to like talk. But yeah, they're like I remember like my American history teacher using the N-word and me having to call him out, and us getting into fights during like American history because he would just like use the N-word, and I would be like I was very rebellious, and I would like yell at him, and then there would be a whole thing. And the car wash was like Ku Klux Car Wash, and I still have a picture of it because it was just like insane.
That was literally the name?
Ku Klux Car Wash, yeah, with 3 Ks. Yeah.
Wow.
And
I'm going to guess that you probably just washed your own car then.
Why
would your parents choose this place?
Because it had the best optometry school or one of the best optometry schools in like the West Coast at least. And so that's where we went, to the small town that had a university in it where my mom could become an optometrist. It was also very, very conservative.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my high school.
So you grow up in the town of the Ku Klux Car Wash.
Yeah.
Which, hopefully at this point has changed its name. But
No, it wasn't directly in the town. It was like next to the towns. Whenever I was on the dance team and the speech and debate team, we would always like drive past it when we were going like to like different high schools, and I'd be like, "This is not great, guys. This is not fantastic." Um, yeah.
so okay, so you escape the racist hinterlands, and then what happens?
I moved to London, and I it was around 2005, and so this was before Banksy was a big name, before graffiti art was graffiti art, and before it was like industrialized. And I was very obviously political, and I sort of did. It's very weird to say because like it's admitting to a crime, but like I did some graffiti work, and I was in like a gallery with Banksy, and I learned a lot in a year that I wouldn't have been able to learn anywhere else about art and telling stories through my art. And I lived in London for about a year, and then I moved to Spain for a while, all learning and sort of trying to create what my art teacher called canary art, which was that if you're an artist, you consider yourself to be a canary. And if you go, miners who go down into the mines, they bring a canary with them, and they know when the canary dies, there's something wrong. And he said the artist should be the canary, and we should be the people who tell others that like something is happening. And so that's what I sort of believed about my political art at that time, that I had to be like a canary. And that was during George Bush and when the wars were happening for like, oh God, I was just so angry even now about it. And so I did that for a while, and then I moved to Florida for a little bit, and then I moved to Yellowstone. Oh,
Pausing you. I'm pausing you. I want to dig in a little deeper.
you haven't even gotten to the crazy part yet, Joel.
I know, but for most people, the crazy part would be, and I don't mean to minimize the importance of being the canary and of the wars, but for most people, the crazy part would be you know Banksy, you know who that is.
I do not know Banksy. I do not.
But you have a pretty good idea of who Banksy is.
I don't know. For a while, I thought I did, but now I don't think I do. But we
Really?
were in a gallery together. I had my art, and he had his art. And I could have bought a Banksy. I remember for 20 pounds. He had prints for 20 pounds. It's like $40. And I didn't buy one. And so now I'm like, wow, that's probably worth like a couple $1,000s now. Could have.
I mean, if you could go back in time and tell the people in that gallery, one of these artists is going to become the biggest in the world, and the other one is going to be Banksy.
No, I mean, Banksy's definitely big. People don't know my name.
I think that there's more people that have seen The Princess Switch than have seen Banksy's art. I'm just going to say that.
I think that Banksy has become so popular that he can no longer really be Banksy, because Banksy was so anti-commercialism, and now his work is on T-shirts. And I don't think he necessarily wanted it to be that way, but I think that's just the way it is. Very much
Is it
like
possible that Banksy's a woman, and that we're all being really misogynist by assuming that he's not.
If Banksy is a woman, then she did a very bad job of promoting women in art, because the day that the art that went through the zip line and then got destroyed, that was a big news article, big news thing. But at that exact same auction, the painting painted by a woman sold for the most ever at an auction was sold. It was a really big deal for the art world, but instead of that being the news story, it was like millions of dollars for that painting. But instead, everyone was talking about the Banksy thing. So, Banksy, shame on you.
Classic dude move.
Classic.
Okay, so let's get back to you and the crazy, because we're coming up on crazy.
Okay, we're coming up on crazy. So I went to Yellowstone National Park. I worked in Yellowstone National Park. I helped the fire department. I got people away from bears and bison. By the way, if you're ever in Yellowstone, don't go near the bison, because that's how you'll die. Because we have to airlift you out and then take you to the nearest hospital, which is a state away. Don't do it. And so that was my job for a little while. And I moved to San Francisco, and I wrote comic books. I was really into comic books and political art, and I thought I was going to be like a artist for the New Yorker. I was going to draw comic books that had political meanings to them. And so then I moved down to Los Angeles to go to Cal Arts. So I was going to be an animator. And so I worked for Apple for 5 years, and while I was a comic book artist, and then I sort of like got into writing for TV and film, and I loved that. And then one day I was in an accident and I lost my right frontal lobe and this half of my brain. And that sucked.
Tell me more about that. What happened, and what does it mean to lose half of your brain literally? So first, what happened? What happened?
I don't, there are parts of it, like in hindsight, I don't really remember. But I remember that I was going to class. This guy, Richard Manning, was my teacher. He's still, I think, the best teacher I've ever had. So if anyone wants to learn how to write, maybe look up Richard Manning. And I tripped and I fell and I hit like the side of my car, but I hit it really, really, really hard. And I remember, I'm not quite sure if I blacked out, but then I remember like trying to get into my car and being like, I'm fine. I'm fine. And then like everything just inverted. It was like a Christopher Nolan movie. Like, I was like, okay, maybe I'm not okay. And I called my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, I think like something's wrong. And later that night, I was in the hospital, and they were like, don't worry, it's just a minor concussion. You're fine. And I went home, and thinking it was just a minor concussion. And as time went on, also, we should note, because this is important to the story, that because they thought it was just a minor concussion, they didn't give me an MRI or a CAT scan that day. And so I went home, and instead of getting better in about 2 weeks, I got progressively worse. And I slowly began to lose my ability to read and write and walk and basically just be a human, until by the time I hit December, I was like bedridden, and I couldn't listen to music. I couldn't really watch TV. I couldn't really do anything.
What would happen if you did?
I would get very, very, very dizzy, and either I would just like sort of fall over, or I would just sort of like hug a wall and I would like get to the bathroom, or like hug a wall and get to like, it was like a rogue in a D&D. I'm just gonna hug a wall. And I sort of stopped eating because it was hard to go to the kitchen. And also at that time I was sort of developing PTSD, and so I thought like everything was going to kill me, like eating things and doing certain things. And so I was in like real bad shape.
And you're at that point, were you living with this boyfriend? Is there somebody taking care of you?
No, my mom came down for like a few weeks, but basically like I was just sort of drowning. Like it was really bad. And I didn't realize how bad it was because they told me I was going to become suicidal, but I didn't believe them because I'm like a very happy person. Like from this interview, like people can probably tell that I'm like the bubbly one. And so when they told me I was going to become suicidal, I didn't believe them. And then one day I was just laying in bed, and my boyfriend was there at the time, and it was just like a light switch just went off or went on or whatever you want to call it. And suddenly I was like, I want to kill myself. And so that was terrifying. So I couldn't really walk, I couldn't read, and I wanted to kill myself. And so finally, like it was December 31st, and I went to the doctors, and I was like, something is wrong. Something is really wrong. Like, you haven't given me an MRI or a CAT scan, but like I kind of can't, I can't really walk, I can't read anymore. Like I'm living life through like a haze, I can't think. And like you got to do something. And so finally they were like, okay, we're going to give you a CT scan. And so, because I was like, it's December 31st, my insurance was going to reset. And so doing it that day was really important. So I think they like did it more as like a favor. They were like, okay, well, we'll do it. And so we got the CAT scan back, and they were like, we're going to have you talk to a neurologist. And I was like, okay, that's a good idea. Fantastic. And so my mom was in town. And so she took me to the neurologist, and the neurologist comes into the room, and she just starts talking to my mom, not to me. And she was like, has Megan ever been able to read? Has Megan ever been able to write? Was she in school? Was she able to be in school with other children? Was she, what was that like? Were you in a car accident when you were pregnant with her? And my mom was just like, no. And then like I was getting really nervous at that point because that these were very odd questions. And she also was asking my mother and not me. And so I finally was like, what did the CAT scan say? And she was like, oh, like, it's sort of like, you can talk. And I was like, yeah, hi, like, can you tell me what the CAT scan says? And she's like, well, it looks like where you hit your head, you now no longer have a brain. And then around the parts that are no longer there, you just have scar tissue. And then she showed me like the picture, and it was just like, literally, it's just not there. And that was sort of terrifying. But the problem is, because they waited 3 months to do the CAT scan and the MRI, we don't know if I never had that part of my brain and I managed to hit myself exactly where it would do the most damage, or if I hit myself somehow hard enough that I lost brain during like my accident. But either way, the brain's not there. And so once we were able to sort of start figuring that out, that was really helpful. And also like a lot of vindication, because for a while the doctors were just like, it's nothing, just wait. And now they were like, okay, yeah, here's what we can do to sort of help. And here's some exercises you can do to maybe like help you walk again. And the biggest exercise really was just like, you're going to walk, you're going to probably fall down, you are going to get very dizzy. But unless you get really dizzy or you fall down, you have to just keep walking, because you're going to have to create new neurological pathways in order to be able to do these things. And so my doctors had me do this thing called walking in fear, which was, even though you're really afraid to walk, because for obvious reasons, just keep going. And that's also been sort of like my mantra in life now, like walk in fear. Like, even though you're afraid, just keep going. And so soon I could walk to like, again, like my block and back. But before I could get any better, also like the whole PTSD and suicidal thing sort of blew up, and I really needed help. So I self-admitted myself into a psychiatric hospital, and I stayed there for 2 weeks and as an inpatient, and about maybe 6 months, maybe a little bit more, as an outpatient. And that's when they told me that I had PTSD and that I was, clinically depressed. And before then, I sort of knew that I was depressed, but I did not, I don't know, I didn't realize that people who, weren't like military veterans could have PTSD. But when they explained it to me, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what is happening. And it was really, really difficult to do that, but it saved my life. And I would say to anyone out there who is, especially in 2020, who is afraid and needs help, the help is out there and you can get better. But it's the hardest part is going to be asking and actually getting the help, because it really took me a long time to do that. And I don't think I would have gotten there if I hadn't had my brother, who literally had to like drive me and like walk me into the hospital. So I would say it's going to be really hard, but it's definitely worth it to get the help. And then during that 6-month period where I was outpatient, I was also sort of learning how to rewalk. So there's like the hospital, and then like 4 blocks away was a Trader Joe's and a Target. I was like, if I can make it there, I will buy myself nail polish. And so like week after week, I would like go a little bit further. I would like, okay, I'd get to the end of the block, and then I would call my Lyft, or then I would go like 2 blocks, and then I would call a Lyft, until finally I could like make it to the Trader Joe's, which was also a really big deal, because then for the first time in like a year, I could buy my own groceries, which was like, I don't know, it may not seem like a big deal, but for me, it really was.
Absolutely. So if you haven't been able to do that, of course.
No, I used like, this was like before Amazon Prime was really big, but like I realized that like they had just come out, and I was like, yeah, I will have people deliver me groceries, because that's the only way I could get food. I bet that's now like not as big of a deal, because like it's 2020 and everyone is doing that, but that is how I got food up until I could walk to the Trader Joe's, and then I would call a Lyft, and then I would go home. And then during that same period of time, a girl who was like sort of my writing partner in crime, like we didn't write together, but we would always go to coffee shops and write. Her name was Claire, and she died of cancer. And that was really difficult for me. But it also put a lot of things in perspective, like you only have one life to live, and now that you can do things again, what do you want to do? And for me, the thing that I missed the most when I couldn't do anything was writing, particularly for TV and television. And so when I got better and I had to decide what I could use my very finite amount of energy on, I stopped drawing and I stopped doing art, and I started just concentrating on just writing for TV and film. And I retook all the classes that I took because I'd forgotten a lot of it. That was lost to like the injury. And which was also hard because I took the first classes with Claire. And so retaking those was like good, but also emotionally difficult. And I also quit my job when I was, healthy enough. And I took the lowest paying job I could on like the scale. So I worked as like a concierge at like a post-production studio. And I like worked my way up to being like PA and then writer's room assistant. And then I wrote Princess Switch. And that is where you have found me. Oh, the thing about being gluten-free though, I also have a problem with my heart, and I had a stroke. And instead of going to my brain, which would have been chaos, the stroke went to my colon, they think, and they shut off my colon. And now I can no longer process dairy or gluten, which is, as someone who loves baking, as you can probably tell from the Princess Switch, has been a blow. But
And so you, to basically just to sum up here, what it appears happened is that you had a full brain, most likely.
we don't know. Like, it's possible that I was born without a full brain.
Okay. It sounds like a diss, but you could say that. I can't say that.
Okay.
But usually, if I tell a woman like you were born without a full brain, like that's abusive. Like that's not kosher. That's not a thing that you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I also like see people talking like about different people as like a dig, like, oh, these people have brain damage, and it's like, don't be saying that. Some of us with brain damage are good people. Don't be hating. But,
right. Well, it's amazing. I mean, your brain has wired itself to basically make full use of the half that it's got.
yeah. Also, it's very strange because I know my brain thinks differently now. Like, I don't know if other people have it, but like an inner monologue. I know that my inner monologue has changed, and the way I literally think has changed, which is very strange.
What is you know that your inner monologue sounds different now than it did before?
Yes.
What does it sound? What's different?
I don't know. Before it was more like a lot of intuition and I could hear my own voice, but like now it's just I'm more pensive and I think things through a lot more, which maybe is a good thing. I'm not as reckless. But I also feel like I've maybe lost a little part of myself because the recklessness is sort of gone, which is very strange. I don't know.
There's also an element of that I think is just part of getting older.
That's
but
true. But like,
it sounds like more of a full reset.
Yeah, because also the cadence in which I think is different, not just like the what I do and what I don't do. The pattern in which I think is different. I can't really explain it. I've tried to come up with a way to think.
Is your writing markedly different?
Yes.
Before and after?
Yes. Also because like before I was writing about certain things, but like afterwards, I mean, besides the Princess Switch and, the Hanukkah movie and another movie I'm writing now that's, very lighthearted, a lot of my stuff is quite dark and talks about those experiences. And that's not something I would have been able to really talk about before. And also, I just think going through like years and years of hardcore therapy with people who are really, really, grasping for life while being suicidal and learning so much about that has made me a bit more emotionally intelligent. And that's caused my writing to be a lot better because then I can think through what characters are thinking. It also helped me personally because I think I can be closer to people now because I can connect with people on a level I couldn't before, including, my boyfriend who became my husband. We were having, fights. And then finally one day, like I saw his pattern of thinking And I realized that he was doing certain things that like my therapist would probably deem like a little odd. And I was like, maybe you should talk to a therapist. Like, no pressure, but like, that's like a little strange. And then he was diagnosed at like 32 with, he being on the autistic spectrum, which like put so many things into perspective for both of us. And we were able to like have a new way of talking to each other. And that really helped our relationship. And I think that if I hadn't noticed that, if I hadn't taken that journey to be able to notice that, I would not have a husband right now. So there's a lot of layers there. There's a lot of layers.
And is this the same boyfriend, now husband, who was with you when the accident happened?
Yes. Which is also just, because we had only been dating for like a few months before I hit my head. And I tried to break up with him. I was like, you maybe deserve a girlfriend who can like walk and like leave the house. And he was like, no, I'm fine. And he was also going through a phase where like his work was really intense. And so he would literally like just come home and like lay in bed with me and like play video games. And like, he was like, I am fine with this situation right now. And maybe that was just kismet, that like we were both at a place where we were just being not outdoors people was fine. But like, yeah.
That's just a story in its own right of a romance that you could write of, and it's a very contained story. It just all takes place in one place. But I know your husband. I did not quite put together that this was the story. He was the same person from the story.
Yes, he is the same person from all parts of the story.
Well, I like him anyway, but now I like him more. Well, to tie it all together, what do you think? Because you talked a little bit about the empathy that you have from this experience of, having your life taken away from you and then getting it back. What do you think you bring to these kinds of more upbeat projects from the darkness that makes them more likely to be successful?
I don't know if it's necessarily from the darkness, but I certainly appreciate comedies more now, because when you're in that much pain, you don't want to watch, Hunting for Red October. Great movie. Don't want to watch it while I'm bedridden necessarily.
And Hunt for Red October is like a comedy relative to like a lot of the premium cable shows now. I can't watch a lot of premium drama now. It's too dark.
Like what I did was like I watched a lot of The Office and Mindy Project when I was getting better. Like, so even though I was like not having a good time, like the things that were sort of getting me through it were comedies with heart. And the same thing with like Superstore, when I, was in the hospital writing The Princess Switch 2 while in the hospital because my colon had shut off and I had a stroke, which was also like crazy. That's where I wrote Princess Switch 2. I wrote all of it basically while I was in the hospital. Like I was watching Superstore because, you have to, like, sometimes you just need something to laugh and like shut off your brain for a little while and enjoy yourself. Or maybe not necessarily shut off your brain, but like, it's okay to like things that are happy. And just because they're happy does not make them less of art, less artistic. I don't know. Because I think that sometimes we get into this pattern of things are better if they're darker. And
right.
As someone who's been through some, not as much as, other people necessarily, but, I just can't necessarily agree with that.
I'm with you 100%. And it reminds me of an interview that I had late last summer with somebody who was a veteran comedy writer. And he was talking about how for him, he's in his mid to late 60s, and that, all the problems of Woody Allen aside, that when Annie Hall came out and when he was kind of at the top of his game and the top of the comedy world, there was a premium put on humor. Like it shifted the conversation to where for a generation, for the next 20 years or so, as this guy was describing it, like being a comedy writer was a cool thing. That was an artist. That was somebody who, had something to say about the world. And that isn't necessarily held in the same esteem now. And not that, Princess Switch, those movies those are comedies. And it's not that that's the only thing that you can write. I've read your drama work. It's good. But I think that there's this feeling, it reminds me of a job that I had. Well, I should say, I think that there's a feeling that drama is more important or more serious right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe after 2020 and all of this that we've been through, that things will shift back, because I don't think it's a coincidence that Princess Switch ends up going to #1 on Netflix, and some of the things I know that they have thought were going to be huge or pretty big in the drama department didn't end up having the same resonance. And it's because, like, life is tough. And I'm reminded of this job that I had when I was in college, where I was doing market research for a movie preview company and would show people trailers for things at like a Tower Records. It wasn't any big deal. But there was this kid who was like right in the age demo of what we wanted to test this trailer. And he was going to do it. And I was like, great. And this kid's probably like 16, 17, maybe 18. And he's like, by the way, what kind of movie is it? And you could tell he was kind of a dick. And I was like, it's a comedy. And he goes, oh, I don't like comedy.
Oh,
I like death.
And it's sort of weird, because also, like, I think as we're also seeing, if you really look at even not comedies, but drama movies that are made today, action movies that are made today, the ones that have heart tend to do much better. Like if we look at John Wick, what do we all know about fucking John Wick? Not only is it great, yeah, but like it gets you right away with heart because of the dog. Like, and then you also have that comedic scene where like he's talking to the police officer, and the police officer's like, everything all right in there, John? And he's like, yep. And you know that like it's not, but they just had like that very weird conversation. And so I would say, like, even things that are like drama or action, like if you put intention in to have empathy in them and not necessarily like darkness in them, like you're going to come out with something that's a lot richer
and humor.
and humor than you would if you just did like, although not to, there are great just straight dramas as well. Like I watched Queen's Gambit a million times because it's fantastic. But also Ted Lasso, for example, got me through probably 2020. Yeah.
And Ted Lasso, famously, the company that made it didn't want to make it. That's a whole other story. We can talk about that another time. But I want to just wrap up by saying that I think that there's something profound in a way about somebody who has been through the kind of stuff that you've been through, having the success that you've had and are having in this lighter space, because it demonstrates that, for one, people can bounce back, and for two, that it's like, listen, if Megan can be funny and find the light even after like the stuff that she's been through, like 40-something male showrunner who like thinks that he's really cool because he desaturates his colors and has a lot of sexual assault like in his show, like you can try and find some light too. Like you don't need to be an asshole.
That's true. I mean, but not everyone has to write the same thing as well. I personally prefer, at least right now in 2020, the things that make me feel good when I watch them. With the exception of maybe Queen's Gambit, because that was also like a little bit of sort of a fantasy thing, maybe for like women, like because I watched Searching for Bobby Fischer a million times when I was a kid, and seeing a woman be in that character role was fantastic. But in general, not everyone has to write a certain way, but I tend towards, at least myself, writing and watching and enjoying certain things, especially in the year of the dumpster fire.
Well, the year of the dumpster fire is ending a little bit better than it would have otherwise because of all the work that you did, which I have to thank you too. So if anybody's watching this who is not a fan of the sitting president, and I realize that describes quite a few of you, I don't know anybody who did more volunteer work than Megan over the course of the 2020 election. How many did you send? How many?
You mean
postcards? Those letters? Yeah, how many postcards?
I lost count, but it's somewhere between 800 and 1,000. Like I have my mug, the Georgia Postcard Project, and this is my postcard writing fuel. And if anyone is interested in writing postcards or letters, I can give you that information and even send you postcards that you can use, because we really need to win the Senate. And people were very engaged with helping Joe Biden because they hated Trump so much. But really, Joe Biden and Kamala aren't going to be able to do as much as they could do if we don't have the Senate. And so winning these 2 seats in Georgia is very important to do. So people can help. We need help.
I love this. And I just want to say, I love that you would use this platform, really, as you've used every platform, to just do more volunteer recruitment.
Oh, goodness. Well,
So everybody, basically, if you want to get involved and or to get to know Megan, you're going to have to write some postcards. If you want to get to know Megan, you can, but you're going to have to write some postcards. And if that's of interest to you, leave it in the comments. And what else are you going to do over the holidays?
Honestly, I have 200 postcards that I have to write by the 25th. So I'm going to write those. And I don't know. I'm going to light my Hanukkah menorah tonight.
And say a little wish.
And I don't know. That's all I've really. I'm going to play some Mario Kart.
Great.
Yeah. Because I can.
Well, what's that?
Because I can now.
Exactly. Well, Megan, it is amazing to have you. And I want to share, Wendy Jones, one of our regular reviewers, says, "Amazing grit, Megan. You should write your own story." And I agree with that.
I'm fine. I'm just going to be down here for a while.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that with us. I'm going to do a quick closing thing, and then stick around and you and I can catch up a little bit.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Tonight's episode of Pandemic is brought to you by Roadmap Writers, and Notes for Execs. Roadmap is an online writer education platform hosted by working industry executives. If you're looking for a real-world solution to help develop, market, and sell your script, visit roadmapwriters.com to learn more. Notes for Execs is a company that guides working entertainment executives on how to give better and more effective creative notes. Now they're opening their doors to writers as well, who can learn a lot about their own writing through learning about the notes-giving process. Visit notesforexecs.com for more information. I want to thank Tasha Cerny, my producer, without whom none of this would be possible, not just for tonight, but for making this show happen throughout this year. And I want to thank Brian Lynch for his help with the same. We have some interesting possible changes that may be coming up for 2021. We're going to be going back on a hiatus for a little while. As we wait, we're talking to a major company about picking this show up as exclusive content of theirs. And for that reason, that is why none of the back catalog stuff has been up on YouTube or Facebook or any of the other places. And why we haven't gone live with our podcast yet is because we're looking at selling it off or co-branding it with this much larger broadcasting company than we are. So stick around for that. If you are not following the page, please do. And we will let you know what we know as soon as we know it about the future of Pandemic and what it looks like, and whether we will be exclusive on a bigger platform. So that's all coming up for 2021. In the meantime, be safe and stay distanced, and have a great holiday as safely as you can. For now, I will leave you all with just a little bit of power metal.
Pandemic.